Good morning, everybody. Oops. Welcome to worship with the community of First Unitarian Church of Omaha. My name is Mary Kay Peters, and I'm your worship associate today. I have another slide I'm going to put up on the screen if I can get this. There we go. Okay. I'm going to be serving as the worship associate, so whether you're attending online or in person, I'm glad you've chosen to worship with us today. I want to offer up a special welcome to any visitors that we have today. This congregation is a community of all ages and abilities. It's a community with a rainbow of gender and sexual identities, and it's a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common religious liberal values. So whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. And if you're joining us online today, you're encouraged to create a YouTube account and sign in so you have access to the comment feature for online chatting during the service. And we also encourage you to use online comments so you can share your joys and concerns, and those will be lifted up in worship today, and just also to say hello to other online attendees, or to share something about how the service connected with you. So for those who are here in person, you're invited after the service to go down to the common room for coffee and conversation. And our speaker today is seminary student Melissa Gibson. She's also our membership coordinator. So I do have a couple of announcements. The first one is that this year, the Pride Parade takes place on Saturday, July 13th, so that's next Saturday. So everybody come to help represent First UU in this year's parade. We'll be marching in the parade, and we need to hear from you now if you're interested. We don't have a lot of details yet, but we want to get the word out as soon as we do. So Jean Wagner is representing the coordination. She's in the back waving. So if you want to send her an email, if you're interested, it's jeanarwagner@gmail.com, and it's also in the email and on the church Facebook page. And just remember that it's an important year to stand up for our friends and family. And I have another one. Douglas County Historical Society has their second Sunday presentation here at First Unitarian next Sunday. That's July 14th at 2 p.m. in the sanctuary. And that's going to be going through the history of our church by Bob Perrin and Dave Richardson, who will be doing the presentation. And admission is free for church members. And then the last quick announcement is that we have a First Steps class after service today, about 15 minutes after the service ends in the Merit Lounge, and Melissa's going to be leading that also. So we affirm that our church occupies the traditional treaty lands of the Omaha and Otoe, Missouri tribal nations, whose sovereignty existed long before the state of Nebraska. We would also like to express our respect to the Ponca and Winnebago tribes of Nebraska, the Santee Sioux tribe of Nebraska, and over 170 other tribes that are represented in our Omaha area. At First Unitarian Church of Omaha, we invite all who join us to go beyond acknowledgments by educating ourselves and supporting causes, charities, and rights of Indigenous peoples in the area. And now Kate Johnson will play For the Beauty of the Earth with a reflection for our prelude. And now for the lighting of our chalice, I'm going to invite Bethany Cook up. Sorry, my clicker's not working. Oh, and so the chalice is the symbol of our faith, and as it's lit, I invite you all to join in the chalice lighting words. They're in your book. Spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life. And now, join me in opening hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. And now join me in contemplative reading. Connie's going to come up and read for us.
These are the words of Dale Willman, journalist. I arrived in Oklahoma City on April 20, 1995, one day after the explosion. Working for CBS at the time, I was there to coordinate coverage and report for the CBS-owned radio stations. Arriving downtown that night, I was shocked at the amount of destruction. Hastily rigged construction lights illuminated the still smoldering wreckage as first responders worked through the mutilated concrete, desperately hoping for some sign of life. What I remember most vividly, though, is the road that passed by the field where the journalists were set up. Down this road each day, past the emergency crews, and some would stop briefly to talk. They were working long shifts, and their job was grueling. Each day, they walked toward the site full of strength and determination, and they would leave, sometimes 12 hours later, covered in dust and sadness. And the next day, they would do it all over again. Their faces, their tears, and their stories of what they saw and felt live with me still.
And now it's time for our community offering. Each week we share our blessings with others through a community offering, and half of the loose currency in the offering plate is donated to a local cause which resonates with UU values. If you're online or prefer to give via your smartphone, you can use the QR code or the link provided. And our Share of the Plate recipient for July is Oats, Open Arms Trans Social Group. Oops, sorry, I thought I had a slide for that, but I don't. Oats welcomes the trans community of all ages, gender identities, and gender expressions, drawing people from well beyond the Omaha area. And while Oats centers the trans experience as we lift one another up in the spirit of fellowship and love, we ignite our cisgender allies, family members, and partners to attend as well. The group meets at Second Unitarian Church. And now Kay is going to play Heart Sounds by David Lanz. And now we have our second contemplative reading from Kira.
This reading is from Camille Mac Bika, a Vietnam veteran in the United States Marine Corps. Most exert great effort, often at considerable personal risk, to protect the innocent and conduct themselves with decency and integrity. Unfortunately, soldiers inevitably are positioned to become the unwitting instruments of slaughter. Such occurrences are always tragic and regrettable, but never more so than when war is misguided and unnecessary. We are the victims of politicians' hypocrisy, the scapegoats for the inevitable affront to the national conscience, and the sacrificial lambs sent to slaughter and retribution for our collective guilt and inadequacies. In fact, no one knows the sacrilege of war better than we who must fight it and then have to live with the memories of what we have done and what we have become.
I actually have a reading by James Baldwin I meant to do earlier, so it's still appropriate to do it now. One discovers the light in the darkness. That is what darkness is for, but everything in our lives depends on how we bear the light. It is necessary, while in the darkness, to know that there is a light somewhere, to know that in oneself, waiting to be found, there is a light. What the light reveals is danger, and what it demands is faith. And now it's time for our care and centering, and this is a time of joys and concerns. And I do have one from Melissa. Joy. The Protect Our Rights ballot initiative collected the most signatures in Nebraska history and had signers from every county in the state. Thank you to everyone who signed, and be sure to vote yes to protecting abortion access in November. And then Colin is going to read the other ones if anything else is collected online or here in the basket.
This morning we have a new attendee online. Aaron J. Wusty was invited by Melissa Gibson. And it says, I love how you pay respects to Native Americans and other important groups from this area. I've never heard this from other congregations I've visited. From Bob Bosco, we have an announcement. Join us for a yoga laughter session today at 2:00 p.m. at Cali Commons, 518 North 40th Street. Sponsored by Laughing with Molly. All ages are welcome. The first session is free. Come out, laugh, and do some yoga.
Thanks. And now we have our third reading, contemplative reading, and Bethany's going to come up and read.
This reading is by Rachel White, an elementary school teacher, which I am myself. So, in the education world, immense injury occurs when the educational policies we are required to follow are at odds with what we know is right. Lawmakers inadequately funding our schools, the implementation of unrealistic standardized testing protocols, and the passing of legislation inhibiting our abilities to make teaching choices as professionals. When policies and laws lessen our ability to help all children reach their potential, educator frustration goes beyond burnout into a moral disconnect.
And I just want to mention a special concern for Bethany's father, who just had surgery. So all of our thoughts and prayers are with you.
He's doing really well.
He's doing really well, okay.
Walking 12 laps.
Wow. Okay, and now we'll take a moment for centering, and we're going to sing song 352, Find a Stillness. I just want everybody to take a moment to just sit back and close your eyes and get comfortable, and we're just going to have a moment of silence. And now we have our fourth contemplative reading, and it's by Beth Conover.
This is from Lisa Doggett, medical director and former family physician. The young man was in his mid-20s when he came to see me for severe abdominal pain at my small community clinic. The pain, worse than any he'd ever experienced, had persisted for weeks and was getting worse. He cried out when I examined him. I didn't know the cause of his pain, but I could think of possibilities, including a ruptured appendix, a perforated ulcer, or pancreatitis. He needed an urgent CT scan and a surgical consult. The fastest way to get both was to send him to the emergency room, but the man said he couldn't go. He was uninsured.
Now I'm going to welcome Melissa up here for her talk about shattered souls, moral injury.
Good morning. As already mentioned, my name is Melissa Gibson. I am the membership coordinator here at First Unitarian, and I am a student at Starr King School for the Ministry, one of only 2 dedicated Unitarian Universalist seminaries in the country. I attend part-time, and I am in my 5th year of study. In spring 2024, so just this past semester, I took a course called Engaging Moral Injury. I admit that my primary reason for taking this course was that it was offered asynchronously, meaning I didn't have to do any in real-time meetings. With 3 kids, a small zoo of animals, a spouse with a demanding career, my work here, and my other activities, not having to commit to weekly class meetings for a semester is a big plus. When I registered for the course, I didn't know what moral injury was beyond the obvious definitions of the words, but it proved to be a rewarding coincidence. I had no idea how much I would grow to appreciate the content and how moved I would be to share the work with others. I am not an expert on moral injury, but I have found incredible logic and even peace in viewing current events through the lens of moral injury. And I am enthusiastic to share it with anyone willing to listen, so that's y'all here today and those of you online. Leading up to the sermon, you heard a few stories about moral injury. These are the actual words from a journalist, a Vietnam veteran, a public school teacher, and a healthcare provider. What happens when you bear witness to horrifying events in which you are helpless to do anything about? What happens when you follow orders that result in the death of innocent civilians? What happens when your policymakers throw you under the bus time and time again? What happens when you prescribe subpar medical treatment to satisfy insurance companies? For some, what happens is moral injury. My goal today is for you to walk away with a very basic understanding of moral injury. I'm not sure any class, let alone a 15-minute sermon, can fully reveal the complexity of moral injury. We will look at how moral injury compares to post-traumatic stress disorder, a term you are likely more familiar with. We will also look at some of the ongoing research behind moral injury and briefly explore ways people are living with moral injury. As we begin, it's important to note that no single event causes moral injury to everyone. 2 people can have the same experience and one walk away fine and the other morally injured. While certain careers and marginalized identities can play a role in someone's lived experiences, factors such as personality, social support network, developmental health, and previous experiences also contribute to how a person reacts to a traumatic event. Not every war vet is morally injured. Not every refugee is morally injured. Moral injury is deeply personal. While we know horrific events take place somewhere in the world at all times, trauma is not actually normal. If it was, it wouldn't be trauma. Trauma overwhelms a person, causing both mental and physical symptoms like raised blood pressure, sweating, and a range of emotions. Upon hearing the term moral injury, most people immediately compare it to PTSD, a diagnosis that is well-researched and well-publicized. It is possible for someone to have both PTSD and moral injury, and some symptoms can overlap, but PTSD and moral injury are distinctly different. PTSD is reactive. It often develops after a traumatic event, such as war, sexual assault, or an accident. Symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, fear, hypervigilance, and possibly aggressive behavior. PTSD triggers a person's fight or flight response. Moral injury tends to be much more lofty, much more in your head. Simply phrased, moral injury is the violation of one's core moral beliefs. It is when everything you believe to be good and true turns out to be a lie. Moral injury is being let down by the institutions that you trusted. Moral injury is shame, guilt, depression, despair, distrust, and anger. There can be a strong desire to make amends in some capacity. As my professor, Dr. Gabriella Latini puts it, moral injury is not threat-based. One may experience it right after a specific incident, or may come to the realization after years of struggle and reflection. Some people will develop it by feeling responsible or somehow morally tainted by actions taken by others. The occurrence of moral injury is as old as civilization. It can be seen in ancient Greek literature like the Odyssey and the Iliad. The idea of moral repair is addressed in ancient Roman law and throughout other world traditions. The term moral injury itself, however, is fairly new, coined in the 1990s and credited to Jonathan Shea and his associates, mental health professionals who worked with Vietnam vets in the Boston Veteran Affairs System. In the early 2000s, interest in research on moral injury grew due to the increasing number of veterans struggling during the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. As one researcher put it, in moral injury, that sense of who you are as a person has been brought into question. We have a lot of people saying, "This is the language I've been looking for the past 20 years." An important distinction is that PTSD is a codified, diagnosable mental disease. Moral injury is not. This means that health insurance doesn't recognize moral injury or cover its treatment. Without a formal diagnosis, moral injury has no standing in the legal world. Moral injury is not included in the Veterans Affairs disability rating system. These are all obvious problems. While there are certainly advantages to formally labeling moral injury as a mental disorder, that identifier falls short in addressing the complicated wounds of moral injury. Can medication and therapy address valuing others, being valued, and belonging? There are social and spiritual aspects at play with moral injury that go well beyond what our healthcare and legal systems can address. Yes, we want the insurance coverage and legal protections, but we do not want those suffering to be shortchanged. Treating and living with moral injury requires deep engagement and understanding, community building, and social transformation. It is so much more than medication and conventional therapy, but make no mistake, those are important too. During my coursework and final project, I concluded that how we treat or live with moral injury is about as diverse as how we might define the soul or morals. There is nothing easy or concise. It is a lot of "it depends" and "maybe" and "both and." One of our Unitarian Universalist sources references the transcending mystery and wonder. I feel like that's where answers and definitions for things like the soul and morals and the perfect treatment for moral injury live. Somewhere or something a bit beyond our human understanding. For my midterm paper, I wrote, "Do you need a psychologist or a priest? Do you need forgiveness or to forgive? Does medication work? How about making art? Maybe working in the garden would help. Try lighting a candle. What does restitution look like? Would that help?" Upon finishing the class in May, I still didn't know. I wrote this sermon, and I still don't know. So maybe try them all and see what sticks. One approach to living with treating moral injury presented in my course was the Jewish practice of teshuvah. Literally translated, teshuvah means a return to God, or put in secular terms, a return to the correct path. It does offer a tidy list of items to check off, including the recognition of one's wrongdoing, remorse, desisting from sin, making restitution, and confession. The idea is to cycle through these steps again and again till you achieve forgiveness. Interesting to me, as someone who comes from a cultural Christian background, there is no designated human authority in the Jewish faith that gives you absolution or tells you how long is long enough or what actions are sufficient. Achieving full teshuvah is ultimately between you and God. Teshuvah may not be the best way for everyone or for every situation, but it is one path to consider. If you're interested in learning more about additional approaches to treating and living with moral injury, I'll be happy to share those with you after the service. Some argue that trauma is just a fact of life. Suck it up and get over it, and for sure, get back to work. During the pandemic, American society found that there was real value in jobs done by grocery store workers, truck drivers, janitors, teachers, and nurses. For all the terrible things about the pandemic, maybe these newfound heroes would finally be afforded the workplace dignities they deserve. Remember those days? Increased pay, more sick days, flexibility for working parents. It happened for some people, for a bit, but I guess it was just a glitch in the matrix. We tell our teachers to constantly do more with less and accuse them of indoctrinating our children with things like factual history and science. We throw our soldiers into war zones, and then, for far too many, the aftercare falls devastatingly short, as reflected in veteran suicide rates. During my final project for class, someone asked how we could make individuals more resilient to moral injury. I still don't have that answer, but I also don't think it's about how you or I can be more resilient, but how can our world be less morally injurious? Till that ideal happens, though, there is power in naming moral injury, in sharing our stories, in building community through things like church choirs and book clubs. Raising awareness about moral injury is a good first step, and I hope that's what we've accomplished this morning. Moral wounds have this peculiarity, Alexandre Dumas wrote. They may be hidden, but they never close. Always painful, always ready to bleed when touched, but they may remain fresh and open to the heart. Ashe, amen, and blessed be.
And now I would like us all to sing together from the Teal Hymnal 1052, The Oneness of Everything.
Everything
seated. And our closing words are also by James Baldwin today. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. Though we extinguish our chalice, may we never stop holding each other with love or break faith with one another.